It's time for the Access of Easy podcast, the weekly technology digest that keeps you ahead of the curve. Brought to you by EasyDNS.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. Len and I were just speaking French to each other. This is Access of Easy number 328, an early Friday morning rep. Len, this is the audio sidekick to the newsletter. Did you know that?
I am aware.
You are aware.
I'm aware.
So if you don't have the newsletter yet in your audio or in your email, you can head over to accessofeasy.com, sign up, get a discount, a deal, some kind from Mark and team when you sign up. And of course, subscribe to this feed on your podcast app or YouTube or Carrier Pigeon. We're working on that. Pretty soon you'll be subscribing on Instagram. It looks like StreamYard just told us that Instagram is doing podcasts now pretty soon. So that's pretty good.
I think it's that they're just able to put it on directly. You probably already had the ability to dump a relatively large video file.
I don't know.
In Instagram.
I'm not sure how big the video files can be on Instagram.
Because I know I put the shorts on for our show. I don't want to go too deep into this. And I've never had an issue with their shorts. But I don't have Instagram aside from the show account. Have you ever come across a very large video file on Instagram before?
I don't go on Instagram too much. Maybe I should start looking into it. But anyway, we'll talk about that another time. Okay.
You don't use Threads. You don't need Instagram. Don't use Facebook. It's a dying platform. It's a dying empire.
Yeah. I put up pictures of my dog sometimes, or if I haven't put up a post on Instagram in a while, I'll let people know I'm still alive. But it's becoming more and more rare. It's really it's like LinkedIn for dating, more or less. I think you put up pictures of yourself, if you're working out. I'm guilty of posting many thirst traps over the years, but anyway, that doesn't matter. This is 328, like I was saying before. Last week's quote, Len, start the same way we always do. All governments suffer a recurring problem. Power attracts pathological personalities. That was by Frank. I don't know if it's supposed to say Herbert or Hebert, but in either case, Bill got it right. So well done, Bill. Thank you for your efforts. This week's quote is a special double header. 2 quotes this week. Sometimes the truth is too simple for intellectuals. That's quote number 1. So if you know who that's by, let us know. And the second quote, the truth never hurts unless it ought to. No looking up the answer. You guys know the deal already. Put it in the comments. Blah, blah, blah. You get it. So, Len.
Have you read Dune before, Joey?
I haven't.
It is good. It's not... It's expansive too. There's so many books in that. And then on top of that, once he passed away, his son and another author took up the torch and wrote stuff for the prequel from Dune as well. And it's not as well received, but I enjoyed what his son did. I mean, it's an interesting universe and an interesting way of looking at things. The movie came out not too long ago, the first part. I'm not sure if you even saw that as well.
No.
So the only thing that's interesting in the movie that's notable, that's not the same as the book, is the character Dr. Kynes, I think. It's a man in the book. It's a female in the movie. For whatever reason, they made
Netflix adaptation meme coming to life there.
There you go. Other than that, it was pretty true to the book, and it was pretty good. I would suggest watching it. It's good for people that haven't yet read the book, but it's awesome for people that also have read the book. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings.
I'll check it out over the break. Maybe my wife and I were actually talking about watching a few movies that we've been meaning to get to over the holidays here. So maybe I'll add it to my list. I'm all for a good movie, although I'm not a big Tim Chalamet fan. So we'll see if I actually do watch it. Anyway, Len, we got what do we got? A handful of stories today. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Where do you want to start? Lots of good stuff.
Judicial Watch. They have been presented some new evidence of something that looks like there may be some shenanigans going on in the 2020 election, the U.S. election that took place in 2020. And through a Freedom of Information Act suit, documents were obtained, and they were showing a connection between there's Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity, and Information Security Agency, and the Election Integrity Partnership. So those two units, there's some sort of connection over there. And what was discovered is that they were doing what they called "quote unquote" real-time narrative tracking, and this was executed on certain and specific social media networks. And the timing of this, where they were executing this real-time narrative tracking, is rather suspicious because it took place all before days leading up to the 2020 election. And if you recall the election integrity partnership, they prioritized what they quote disinformation that is going viral. I don't know how they came across this type of term, how they figured out something is
What do you think at this point the glossary of terms looks like for Access of Easy? The number of times we've read like a term from a story or something that was being tracked or traced or like, influenced. These terms get crazier and crazier. Like every week it seems like we're saying something and just having a laugh about it as if we are supposed to believe that this is the intention of any of these operations over the last, 8 months we've been doing the show. It never fails to amaze me how stupid these things are.
it reminds me of the names of bills that are proposed in whatever
Yeah.
government, and it's like the act to protect citizens from from themselves. And you look at it, it's just some omnibus bill that it has nothing to do with protecting people from anything, and that's what it is. I despise those type of bills that have those type of names. This is the same thing. It's in the same vein. Anyways, the sponsorship that they have, I'm talking about the election integrity partnership with the Department of Homeland Security, should really come as no surprise because they were flagging specific social media posts online and also stories online. So there has been a lot of talk in the last 3.5 years, about what is being done by the social media, that by these powerful entities that are manipulating social media companies and the platforms that they run in terms of trying to make the narrative go a certain direction. And this may be some more proof, some more added fuel to the fire that yes, indeed, stuff was going on behind the scenes to ensure that the narrative is being done in a certain way. Look, we have the 2024 election coming up. I suspect the same type of shenanigans will probably be coming up as well.
Agreed.
It's one thing if a social media network does it on their own. They are a private or public entity, but really they are an entity. They could do whatever they want. You could punish them however you wish. But if it's done at the behest of a government trying to tell them to go a certain direction, that's, in my opinion, that's wrong. And that type of meddling should not take place. And that's my 2 cents.
It's interference, right? It's interference. We've heard so many times over the years, in fact, the skeleton of Hillary Clinton still somehow collecting dollars from various institutions and organizations to give speeches where she gets on stage and, after having a few drinks, like I would imagine, gets to outright deny the validity of the 2016 election still to this day. Meanwhile, they call anyone who thinks 2020 was stolen an election denier. And in some cases, especially relating to Hillary Clinton, they jailed people who, went to the Capitol on January 6th. Famously, we've seen, in terms of these online platforms, we've seen a man in the United States jailed for 6 months for posting a meme about Hillary Clinton. I don't know the exact nature of that meme, and I might be missing some important details of that story. But at the end of the day, the gist of it is that this guy posted a meme in the 2016 campaign, during 2016 campaign, went to jail for 6 months. Like this kind of stuff, when you talk about deep state, or as I like to call it, permanent Washington, there's really no doubt that this stuff is going on, right? I mean, this happens at every level, I think, in the United States, probably here too, probably overseas, probably wherever you pick your poison here, Democratic, first world or otherwise. I think the thing that we're just now finding out through through organizations like Judicial Watch, that's Tom Fitton's organization. He's a good follow on Twitter. He posts a lot of videos, and I recommend, especially during elections, following a guy like that. I just think that like people are naive to think that this is not going on. And the question for me and for a lot of others should be, to what extent am I being victimized by, orchestrated propaganda campaigns vis-a-vis these partnerships between DOHS and the CIA or the FBI and Facebook, or Meta. Great example of this. I don't think it's in the stories, but we saw yesterday here in Canada, during COVID, the government paid something like $750,000 to a handful of influencers to kind of boost up the reputation of Health Canada. That's a pretty small potatoes compared to something like this, but the direction, like directionally, it's the same thing. And you're seeing this more and more. And I'm interested now, Len. I got to say, I think about like this FOIA in the States. I think about the access to information protocols that we have here in Canada. And I got to imagine, Len, that pretty soon those programs are going to be neutered in a major way, because they really do almost every time there's a release damage the integrity and the reputation of the sitting government. And so I can't imagine these programs are going to continue in earnest. Honestly, that's where I think this is probably going to go. But anyway, that's a story for another time. Interesting stuff. People should pay attention to this and really think about what you're consuming and when and how things change leading up to elections and the stakes here, because to think that nothing is going on, I think is really to your detriment.
Those Canadian influencers that were given money, at least supposedly given money by the Canadian government, apparently a number of them no longer even exist on Twitter.
Surprise.
So questions about that. Oh, by the way, the Italian, the Italian health minister? The former Italian health minister is up for charges for murder for what happened with pushing some sort of, we won't go into that. But anyways, that's just something new that came out today.
Noted.
There's been a major operation, and it was codenamed Storm Makers 2. Now, this is internally created from the Interpol. They created this particular code name, so they had a lot of time to figure it out. They had a lot of different.
We give it. We're nerfing the name before we even.
Well, Storm. Let's give it a some ranking. And surprisingly, I'm going to give it a decent ranking altogether. I'm going to give it 3.5, maybe even 4 to 5. I like it. It's a sequel, though. I would have given it higher if it wasn't a sequel. So it's Stormmakers 2. If it was the original, I'd give it a higher mark.
I got to know the original Stormmakers operation, find out really how successful or unsuccessful that was, I think. But again, Len, I am very partial to things that remind me of, what my Age of Empires 1 keygen software would have been called when I downloaded it off Morpheus back in the day. So this sounds like something I might have grabbed and heard a lo-fi kind of keyboard, anthem when I turned it on and started generating keys for me and my buddies to play Age of Empires on LAN. I'm giving it a 3.5, only because Interpol, like you said, a lot of resources there. Surely they have many other names they could have come up with, but not bad. We've seen worse on this program. I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Okay. So, it was a major international operation, and it was conducted, as I mentioned, by Interpol. And this is to combat human trafficking and smuggling, which nobody would like, and everyone would be against this because of what's impacted, who's impacted, and what you're doing.
Yes, sir.
And they're absolute pieces of trash. The operation, which saw participation from law enforcement in 27 different countries, was deemed to be a resounding success, resulting in the rescue of a number of different victims and the arrest of significant number of criminals involved in these activities. And one of the takeaways from this operation was the emergence of a new cyber scam employed by traffickers to lure unsuspecting individuals into a trap. And these scams often involve fake job advertisements posted online. I wonder if LinkedIn or Instagram is involved in these things, but I digress. So when they posted these fake advertisements online, they pursued the victims and eventually led them to the clutches of the human traffickers. So this type of stuff, I mean, we can't overstate how bad human trafficking and smuggling can be, because there's a lot of people that are impacted from it. And the victims that are involved, they have no way to fight back. They're just subjected to their masters, and it's essentially a form of slavery. And obviously, this is something that should not happen in 2023, and we're approaching 2024. So yeah, not that I'm for this type of. I'm for large scale operations that are done by Interpol, but this one in particular, I hope they could take this down. Unfortunately, this is something that is going to be there for a long period of time. There's no way to get rid of everybody, all these human traffickers and smugglers. That's just, unfortunately, another thing about smuggling too of humans. It might also be another way for people to claim refuge in a country. I don't know for certain, but I do know that in order to enter into, like, for example, Canada, if you're from a country that requires visa to get here and they can't get a visa, they have to approach somebody and they get the fake passport with a fake visa to enter in Canada. From there, they could claim asylum here. So I'm wondering if this also they're dealing with those type of people as well. I do not know, but if they are, then it's probably going to reduce a little bit the amount of refugees making claimants in Western nations. So yeah, that's it.
I don't really have much to add to this, except that Interpol, we've heard them mentioned on the show often, different initiatives as far as like controlling speech, for example, and persecuting people who are spreading misinformation, quote unquote misinformation. It's been a topic on this platform a number of times. The thing that I like is the same, for me, it's the same as for you. This is sort of despicable behavior, among the worst types of behavior that the planet has to offer. Trafficking kids and trafficking people is just really the worst of the worst. The thing I'm curious about, Len, they mentioned here a few hotspots, Thailand, obviously among them, Myanmar, there's a few other places they mentioned here. I'm not really interested in this topic as far as like a news point of view. I don't read a lot about this, unfortunately, I guess. But what little I do know, the same countries keep coming up over and over again. How much cooperation is Interpol getting from local authorities? How much work are local authorities doing to kind of curb this stuff? Like, to me, this is just another example of kind of corruption run amok. Here, obviously, we have insider stock trading, basically like a licensed insider trading operation for any elected official. But that's really not even close as far as like, significant outcomes to something like this in one of these third world countries. I'm curious, like, the United States, for example, sends a lot of military force all around the world to defend its interests, blah, blah, blah. And we hear a lot of stuff, especially here, about we need to send money to protect people. We need to send money to help people, support people. But I don't see a lot of our resources going to places like this to protect against operations like this one. I'm curious about why. And maybe it's because those governments are, not so inclined to take that help in certain respects. There's not a lot here about cooperation from these governments, like I mentioned. It's a weird like silo of crime that everyone seems to know exists. And honestly, Len, a lot of people seem to know where it exists and how it works. And still we can't pin down these hotspots in a real way. And to me, it's just like, I don't know. I'm not like being conspiratorial here. I'm just wondering, like, why can't we do this? Like, what is the missing ingredient here? We seem to have all the other, all our bases covered, but we can't end these things or really slow them down in any significant way. I don't know why.
They have to bunch it in with something else, like with climate. And it could be the climate and human trafficking protection.
There goes the monetization for this video. That's it. Just lost it. Sorry, guys.
So let's move on. So a cyber attack on Norton Healthcare, and this is a large healthcare system in the United States. They have suffered, and the result of this is a data breach affecting millions of patients. And we talk about this weekly, sometimes multiple times every week. The attackers in this particular case, they gained access to a variety of personal information, including, we're just rehashing the same old stuff from in the past and other data breaches: names, date of births, social security numbers, medical records. And just another example of a data breach, but not an overreach, because this is not anybody overreaching here. And Norton Healthcare, and this is a Kentucky-based company. They first became aware of the attack in November of 2023, so just last month. Mm-hmm. And when they learned about it, they did what they normally would do. They immediately launched an investigation. But notably, they're saying they don't know yet how many patients were affected by the breach, but it's believed to be in the millions.
Yeah.
And Norton Healthcare is in the process of notifying all the affected patients and offering them the proverbial free credit monitoring that identifies theft protection.
I love it.
Millions of people have been hacked to the point, like as I said, their names, their date of birth, this social security numbers, and medical information. This is damning information that if somebody were to get hold of, they could cause some serious harm to an individual. And the attackers, they are believed to be a cyber criminal group known as Lockbit. 2 out of 5 at best.
Yeah, max, not good.
Yeah, so Lockbit. They are, though, a prolific ransomware gang that has been responsible for a high number of profile attacks in recent years. I'm not sure. Did we ever talk about Lockbit in the past here in Access of Easy?
It's not. It doesn't really bode well for the quality of the name if we don't remember if we talked about it. It's so familiar. Lock is in there. Bit is in there. Like, give me a little bit more effort. That's like just to go back to the name here. That's a 0 out of 5 for me. Like, not even
even worse. Yeah, it's not like Lazarus Group when we know we talked about them in the past. This one. Yeah. So this group, the Lockbit group, they are known for demanding large sums of money from its victims in exchange for decrypting their data. This is their game. This is what they do. And another one is now impacted by this Norton Healthcare. Pretty sad stuff. And is this token, that what you're giving people as a way to credit monitoring, free credit monitoring, is this enough? I don't know, but this is par for the course these days.
Pretty soon, like when I go to weddings, I may be a little too old for this now. Like I think I've had my wedding, my wedding blast the last like 5-6 years, but you always write the same thing at the end of your wishes in the card. Like, I wish you a lifetime of love, happiness, health, and may you never have 2 free years of data and credit monitoring from any of the platforms that you operate on or use for healthcare. You're gonna have to add that pretty soon because everyone is just getting hacked. And by the way, a little bit far afoot here, ShakePay, Canadian Bitcoin exchange, data breached. Had a problem. They announced yesterday in basically the middle of the night or late last night. And did you see what they're offering people?
Are they doing the free credit monitoring services?
Doing the credit monitoring, baby. It's standard fare. It's like so chintz, man. I don't know. Again, the problem really with this kind of stuff, Len, is that you don't have an option but to give your data to the hospital. Like if you go to the hospital, you need something done, they're going to ask you where you live and who you are and all that stuff. That's fine. That's, their prerogative. Or their requirement, I should say. The problem is they don't secure the data. Like no one is securing the data anymore. So I don't know. Like, what do should we open up like a little OR, ER in my basement here? I got one more spare room. Put the studio in one room, OR, ER, KYC free operations. What do you say? I mean, the results may vary, but we won't take your ID. That's for sure.
I'm squeamish with it when it comes to medical stuff, so it would be terrible for actually doing it. So yeah, I'm not involved. Let somebody else get involved. You might make bank on this one. And the good news is nobody's going to take anything from you in terms of data because it's all KYC free.
You only lose your kidney. You don't lose your identity.
All right, let's talk about Epic Games. And there was a challenge they proposed against Google's monopoly. And Epic Games, their antitrust challenge was successful. They scored a victory against Google. And on December 11th, this just very recent, this information, a San Francisco jury delivered the decisive victory for Epic Games. And this was a high-profile antitrust lawsuit against Google. And the lawsuit centered around Google's Play Store. And for those unaware, this is the Google's version of the App Store. And this is where Epic Games claimed operated in a legal monopoly. So this is going to be a landmark ruling against all other tech giants out there. And so the verdict basically says that that Google screwed up and they unanimously sided with Epic Games on all counts that Google maintained a monopoly. They engaged in anti-competitive practices and they were doing stuff that were harming consumers. This seems like stuff that's rehashed few decades ago surrounding Microsoft. It seems like the same thing that now just Google is doing it. Anyways, the potential impact from this ruling, and it's going to be obviously appealed. It's a major setback for Google, and it's going to potentially reduce monopolistic power from Google. They may have to change their activities on the Play Store, potentially even lowering commission fees and allowing developers to use alternate pay systems. And it will have precedents for future cases as well, because Google didn't just screw over Epic Games, probably a few other companies as well. And this remains a little bit on future what's going to happen with Google Play should this verdict remain and it not be challenged, or if it's challenged and the ruling is not overturned. But this is not the last we're going to overhear of this, because obviously they're going to be challenging this to a higher court, and we'll see if they're going to change this. But it goes to show you that there's a lot of power that Google has, not just on the search engine side of things and YouTube side of things where they can control the narrative, but also on the Play Store where they are forcing developers to bow down and accept their terms and conditions no matter how bad they may be.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to recommend another podcast here because I listened to a bit on this yesterday I thought was really well done. It's called Sharp Tech, and it's from Ben Thompson and Andrew Sharp. They do a little comparison, Len, between this case and the Apple case, and they talk a lot about two things. One, the first thing they talk about is how Google was sort of unwilling to admit that they were exercising this level of control over the application platform, like the Google Play Store. And the other problem, so that there's a kind of two-prong issue, right? One is that Apple makes all the devices on which the App Store operates. That's a big one. That's one of the problems that Epic has had in going after Apple for antitrust. Basically, they're saying, look, there are devices. We want the devices to function a certain way. It keeps the device value high. It keeps the devices intact. And so that's why we run the App Store the way that we do. It's a tight ship. If you don't like it, get another device. They've been successful there. The other prong is the payment platform, the payment rail, right? So Google Play has one, or Google Pay is one, Apple Pay is the other. Apple takes 25 basis points off every credit card transaction done through Apple Pay. Did you know that?
No.
So they're doing pretty well there, right? And that was one thing that Epic also said. And obviously the App Store has been, the subject of a lot of debate over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of antitrust and closed ecosystem. But the thing that Google is having problems with is, look, you don't have device, like the monopoly on the devices doesn't exist here. You can't say that you need this stuff to protect the device, protect the platform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was one of the reasons they lost. And so contrary to what may seem sort of intuitive, Apple has basically, shielded themselves from a similar ruling because they are the only ones making the devices. Interesting stuff, right? You would think that that's more monopolistic, but in the eyes of the law, it's not. And so I recommend listening to this podcast if you can find it. Again, it's called Sharp Tech. I think this story is important, Len, because you're an Android guy, and every Android person I know ends up just loading like APKs and doing side-loaded apps after enough time, because the App Store doesn't have all the stuff you want, especially for guys like you and me who are a little more advanced on the tech side. They're looking for specific applications, specific use cases that Google Play just doesn't support, or you have to pay too much for, or whatever. I expect to see a proliferation of sort of free app ecosystems on Google's side. Now, Apple, again, this is not an Apple story, but Apple is sort of in the same battle right now overseas about the App Store specifically. You should let people sideload. We'll see how that goes. In my personal view, I mean, I'm an iPhone guy. I've been an iPhone guy on and off for the last 10 years, 12 years. I would suggest to people that your iPhone will work better for longer because of the tight way the App Stores run. And you may not agree with that as far as like the principles of it, but certainly Apple has a case to make here that to protect the value of their brand, this is what they've chosen to do. And it's been wildly successful. You could point to resale values. You could point to the number of years these phones last. I don't see how they lose that fight. And Google now, don't forget, Len, there was a time when Google was making their hardware, right? They stopped for a while. Now they've begun again. They make the Pixel hardware. Are they going to start being the only hardware provider and force guys like Samsung and others to go off the script as far as firmware? Don't forget, there's already a lot of Chinese manufacturers. Xiaomi, for example, runs the MIUI Android skin. OnePlus, Oppo runs its own skin of Android. So maybe they come up with a way to do that. But to me, short term, this is a win. Long term, though, Len, especially for a big player like Google, I would expect them to close the gates a little bit and go the hardware route that Apple's gone. So we'll see how this goes. Interesting all the same. It's a fun story to follow. With
respect to the operating system, though, I think they're kind of limited due to licensing. I could be wrong, because
they are for now, but there's nothing stopping them from putting together a proprietary OS that runs on only the hardware they produce and telling everyone else, you can make your own hardware. You can use Android, the open source version if you want, or whatever, but we're going to run a closed source, closed ecosystem on the phones that we produce, and we're going to make the best hardware. Because they're already doing the same thing Apple does, right? Apple has its own silicon. This is like the value smile curve that everyone talks about when it comes to Apple devices. Apple owns the branding IP. They own the software. And typically the hardware is where you lose a little bit of money on the manufacturing and stuff. But if you can get all three longer term, you benefit from that in your P&L. And so Apple has done that. They did it over the years with the M series Mac chips, and now they've done it in their silicon in the phones as well. And so, I mean, it works. The question is, does Google want to go that route? It's probably, quite a difficult thing to start doing. I mean, there'll be some recoil there, but long term, I mean, I don't think the results kind of speak for themselves on the Apple side. The question is, can Google duplicate it, right? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't want to talk too much about this. The success of Google is because it operates on so many different devices. It's they give it the operating system for free, and it's built on Linux. So I don't know for sure exactly what type of license they have to GPL2, but does that allow them to close source? And that's what Linux is.
Well, they'd have to design their own, I think. They would have to leave behind the Android system as you know it.
Oof,
I know. I know it's a big ask, right? But long term, because if they're losing cases like this, long term, what is the other option? I don't know. You just keep losing and opening and opening and opening, and before you know it, you don't have the payment rail, you don't have the app store. Those are big rev streams, man. Especially because the TAM for Android devices includes most of the developed world, right? And some of the or most of the developing world, I should say. No one in India is rocking an iPhone. They're all rocking, $100 Android phones. Same thing with parts of Africa and other sort of lower income developing. It's a big
It is.
thing. It's a big thing.
It really is. And let's push more towards open development. That's not closed development, because again, I want to respect my privacy. I'm sure others as well. But anyways, let's keep moving on. I guess according to Foresight News, decentralized protocol called Velodrome. They reported that their domain names, velodrome.finance and aerodrome.finance, were targeted in a DNS attack. And they have been looking into this, and all the initial findings, they're showing that users were interacting with the attacker's website, and ultimately they may have lost up to $250,000 in total. So Velodrome is it's a very important player in the DNS side of things, because these two websites, apparently people were using it and got rugged in the process. This is all because several individuals who were interacting with the counterfeit websites got rugged in the process, and after implementing remedial measures, testing, and gathering user feedback, no traces of internal or external leaks associated with Velodrome/Aerodrome or other registrars were found. This is crazy. The root cause of the attack was the use of social engineering by the attackers to gain control over the domain name accounts held by registrar. And this allowed them to bypass 2FA and other security mechanisms. And this enabled the attackers to change the domain name servers and redirect legitimate domain traffic to malicious clones of the Velodrome and Aerodrome websites. So people that are going to it had no idea that it was fake, that it was compromised. That is scary, because they just simply did their business like usual, provided the information. Oh, they got rugged in the process as a result. Man, this is a scary attack. And this could, I'm not sure if bigger websites could be attacked in a similar vein, but if so, this could be like cash cow for whoever does it, because so many websites out there, people are willingly giving information. Think of your bank site, for instance. Man, I don't want to just talk about it any further, because we'll give these people even more ideas. This is pretty damning stuff.
Well, this is why you need a service like DomainSure, right? They have many different sort of facets and vehicles to help protect from this. Set and forget DNSSEC, free phishing takedowns, and more. I gotta ask, Len, what would be the way that you could be socially engineered? Someone calls you, it's an unknown number, you pick it up, and they start talking to you about like NHL 94. Is that how they get to you? They open up a soft spot in your heart, and then before you know it, you're giving them your social insurance number. Like, what is, I don't think I would ever be vulnerable to this, but sometimes I read stories and I think like, I don't have, I'm fortunate to not have a sort of website where this could happen. If anyone did this to Canadian Bitcoiners, it would never happen, because, Mark and EasyDNS are helping us with that. And I just think like, what would be the avenue for me to become vulnerable enough in the moment to give somebody some information I shouldn't give them? I don't know.
They'd really have to hit a soft spot. Bring up Bitcoin, of course, and I don't know. I don't know who the heck would do it. But in this particular case, I mean, once the social engineering took place and they found that vulnerable individual to hack them, then it became open season for these guys to do whatever they want. They were able to do whatever, and that's a sad thing. So you just have to find out one weak link, which could be that one weak human being. But I don't know. It's pretty sad what happened here.
Get DomainSure for your stuff. DomainSure.com. Don't forget to sign up for that and take a look. Maybe it can help you if you're a listener viewer of this show. Don't get got by weak links, as Len said. That's it, Len. That was the last story. That's the end of Access of Easy 328. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your week next week, and we'll see you Thursday. Usual time, usual place. Till then, take care of yourselves.
Yeah, and watch Dune. You want me to shut her down?
Yeah.
Sorry, brother.
That's okay.
Well,
I didn't go into the